Hello, everyone. Guess back. This guy back on the podcast today. Sports review topics. Welcome back, everyone. It's good to be back. Some very intriguing things went down this weekend as far as the sports world is concerned. Got a bunch to go over today. Go over some of the moves that were made at the NBA trade deadline that happened last week. Go over the big news that happened at UFC 260 on Saturday night, as well as the big trade, the first major trade happening in the 2021 NFL Draft. Go over all that, my thoughts on that. Like I said, thank you for joining me. If you're new to the podcast, like and subscribe. And let's get into the news starting today. So, last week, was the trade deadline for the 2021 NBA season. So, many contenders made moves, some interesting moves at the deadline. For starters, we had the Miami Heat, who have gone into a sort of rhythm as of late. Start rising from their horrible start, now are on the path to a playoff team, currently number 8 seed in the East. The Miami Heat acquire Victor Oladipo, and with the injury to Jimmy Butler, it makes sense. I mean, Oladipo is going to be a free agent after this season. The Rockets have sucked this season. I mean, the worst team in the West besides the Timberwolves. But it makes sense for both sides. You know, the Heat need a guy to kind of plug into the role with Butler dealing with an injury, and basically everyone's healthy again besides Jimmy Butler. Bama Adebayo, Dragic is healthy again. I mean, Hero, as they make their way towards the playoff push, it's a good move. Then the Dallas Mavericks, who are back in playoff contention, number 7 seed in the West, signed JJ Redick, shooter JJ Redick, who should be an interesting complement to the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis, Tim Hardaway, Josh Richardson, etc. But interesting move. And probably the biggest, definitely have gotten the most news out of all the moves on the trade deadline. The Atlanta Hawks and acquired, I had a brain fart, but the Atlanta Hawks and the LA Clippers made a move or made a trade, interesting trade for this season. So the Clippers sent Lou Williams, who is a really good bench player, and 2 draft picks to the Hawks for Rajon Rondo, who, I mean, yes, we can say that Rondo is older and he's not the same player as he was, but he was very critical in the Lakers winning the NBA title last season. He can still go when needed. He still provides that experience factor. I mean, the Clippers, yes, you have Kawhi. Yes, you have Paul George. I mean, yes, I know. But you need more veteran experience. You need more guys. You need more dogs that have that mentality when you're gearing towards a playoff push. As for the Hawks, I mean, getting Lou Williams and 2 draft picks definitely should benefit Atlanta. So good move. And also, Aaron Gordon quickly was acquired by the Denver Nuggets, which is another good move, as well as the Chicago Bulls. They acquired Nikola Vucevic from the Orlando Magic. So, very interesting moves. Next, we go to UFC 260. Interesting. Ngnanou for Francis Ngannou for Stipe Miocic 2. The rematch. I was talking to one of my friends about it. He asked, who am I going for? And I said, well, when you look back at their first fight at UFC 260, Stipe weathered the storm in the first round and controlled the fight with volume and wrestling. He controlled the fight and wore down Francis. And I told him that if Francis can go back, look at the mistakes he made the first fight, and tidy it up, because he says he's made improvements. And you know how powerful Francis has been or is, that if he can tie up some mistakes and be more disciplined, then I just see Francis taking this one. And that he did. The first round, Stipe looked to do more of the same. I would say in the first fight, he landed some punches. He went for a takedown, but right away, Francis countered that takedown and instead took Stipe down for a minimal amount of time, but landed some good, solid punches. Let Stipe know that Francis is ready to make his adjustments. Then the second round, Francis landed a kind of leaping, stiff, straight left, and which riled Stipe. Stipe still kind of kept his bearings, but then Francis landed a beautiful left hook, and Stipe fell a la Mirko Cro Cop against Gabriel Gonzaga, and thus we crowned a new UFC heavyweight champion and the Predator, Francis Ngannou. Now, Stipe, like I said before, has been on this long run. You know, you know, he knocked out Werdum in Brazil. He beat Overeem, avenged his fight with Dos Santos. He beat Francis the first time. He got knocked out by Cormier, came back to win 2 straight times in 2 long fights, grueling fights. So, hats off to Stipe. Francis, he did it. It's crazy. He's 34 and he's still kind of relatively new to the sport. He's only been this, a few years now? It's crazy to think, but yeah, hats off to both guys. Who would be next for Francis? There are a few options out there. I mean, obviously, the most enticing one and the one that's going to draw the most is Jon Jones. Now, excuse me. Here's the thing with Jon Jones is he hasn't fought in quite a while. Like almost 2 years or so. Almost a year and a half. But because he last fought Dominic Reyes, which went to a decision. And then, he has not fought at heavyweight yet. So I'm curious if he wants to be thrust. But here's the problem. Who do you put Jon Jones up against if he doesn't fight for the heavyweight belt first in heavyweight? That's kind of the problem. Now, there's couple other options. There's Alexander Volkov, who, according to the rankings, would be the top priority. Volkov, Francis, there's been a little back and forth the last couple years. So that would be interesting. Because Volkov, his style, being lanky, rangy, and interesting how he would do. Then, of course, you also got the Derek Lewis rematch. Derek Lewis, he just knocked out Curse Blades. The first fight with Francis was boring. Just flat out boring. And, when you have a fight that's so on the down, well, all you can do is go up. So, it couldn't be as bad as the first fight if they want to do that. So they got a few other options. As for Stipe, I imagine he'll take some time. Honestly, he fought 2 long fights versus Cormier, and now this tough loss getting knocked out by Francis. Yeah, I imagine he'll take some time away, spend some time with his family, regroup, and probably be back in the fall, if not in 2022. But hats off to Stipe. And then two other fights that were unfortunately, Volkanovski versus Ortega was taken off the card because someone on Volkanovski's team tested positive for COVID, so he was off, or that fight was off. So the co-main event was Tyron Woodley versus Vicente Luque. Now, Vicente Luque, for the hardcore UFC fans, know that he was on a pretty long win streak prior to his loss to Wonderboy, and has had a few wins since, and now it's another big test for Tyron Woodley, who in his last three fights has looked really uninspiring. He lost the belt decisively to Usman. He lost in a bad way to Gilbert Burns, and then he lost to Colby. And how this fight? Now, Woodley looked better in this fight. He looked a bit more rejuvenated. He tagged Luque a couple times. He went for the kill. He knew he had to be urgent, but Vicente Luque sitting there, tagged Woodley as well, and eventually caught with a minute left in the first round a Darce choke and tapped out the former champion Tyron Woodley. So massive win for Vicente Luque against his second prime opponent, big name opponent. He delivers. And another bitter pill to swallow for Woodley. He loses 4 in a row. Woodley, when you have your day and win the title, he went on his little run, but then he lost the title, and with his getting his little rap game, sorta, he hasn't looked the same, and I'm curious if that might be the last fight we've seen of Tyron Woodley in the UFC. But we'll have to see. Otherwise, very interesting fight very interesting win for Luque. There are a bunch of interesting fights that await the top of the welterweight division. Colby, Usman, and Masvidal are gonna fight again next month. Interesting. There's also Gilbert Burns. Yeah, there are a bunch of interesting fights to make on the horizon for Vicente Luque. And then another fight to mention about. The Sugar Show is back. Sean O'Malley. Now, no matter how people want to criticize his unwillingness to accept his loss, basically against Chito Vera in his last fight, where he suffered a leg injury, but this fight he looked really good against Tom Salmea, who at one time was one of the scariest dudes in the bantamweight division. But this was a solid fight. There was a moment where Sean O'Malley landed a partially blocked head kick and landed a stiff right hand and dropped Almeida and thought he had the walk-off knockout. But then Almeida came up and the fight continued. And then, the fight progressed. Almeida fired back with some kicks. Tried to change the tune of the fight, but O'Malley came back, fired with a right hand, and dropped Almeida and finished the fight. So, hats off to both. O'Malley, the Sugar Show, back on board. Hats off to both for a solid fight. Now, so that was my thoughts on UFC 260. Now I give my thoughts on the very interesting trade that happened for shaking the boundaries of the NFL 21 NFL draft. So, the Miami Dolphins, who had the number 3 overall pick in the draft by virtue of the Laramie Tunsil trade, traded with the San Francisco 49ers, who were at pick number 12. So they traded back, and then the Philadelphia Eagles were at pick number 6, and they traded up with the Eagles to number 6, while the Eagles trade back to 12. So essentially, the Dolphins only trade back a little bit to acquire some picks, and the 49ers trade all the way up to 3, and the Eagles trade back a ways for a future first round pick. So now, first off, what does this mean for the 49ers? Well, like I said in the thumbnail, Jimmy G is on borrowed time in San Francisco. I think this is the ultimate signal that Jimmy G's time in San Fran as the starting quarterback is up. Or almost up. Now at pick number 3, because You know Trevor Lawrence is going to the Jags at the first overall pick. Now, at pick number 2 is where it gets interesting because the Jets could go a few different routes. You know, they could take Zach Wilson. They could take Tanae Sewell, Rashawn Slater. They could trade the pick. That's interesting, but no matter what they do, there's going to be at least either Justin Fields or Zach Wilson or someone will be available for 49ers at 3. Or they may take Mac Jones or Trey Lance. That's a thought. So there's that about the Niners. As far as the Dolphins go, because I'm going in order of the draft, what this means for the Dolphins is, I think if you're Tua, you get a sigh of relief a bit because at 3, there's the interesting possibility that they may take a quarterback or they may trade for one. With them moving back, I think it means they're likely going to draft a skill position player, whether that's Kyle Pitts, whether that's Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, or get another offensive lineman. That's a thought, but means good for Tua, and they'll add some help. Now, who knows? They may trade for a quarterback still if I prefer Deshaun Watson obviously over Tua. And I think if they could, they might get him. But I think this move ultimately means they're going to get a skill position guy to help on the offense. Last but least, the Eagles at 12. Now, if you're an Eagles fan, you gotta be feeling really almost disgruntled because it's weird. Going back to the game against Washington to end the season, Doug Pearson can say all he wants. They purposely gave up on that game. They gave up on that game the second they put Nate Sudfeld in for Jalen Hurts. Now, so people are talking about, they did that for draft positioning. Well, they got to 6 and then they traded back to 12, which, looking at the records, they could have possibly been around that range of 10 or 12, or they would have had a worse record than the Cowboys, so they would not have been 11, but they'd probably been 10, where the Giants are. So, also, they move a pick back of their division rivals, because the Giants are at 10, the Eagles are at 11. So, if you're the Eagles, you gotta be feeling a little worried. But I can understand if an Eagles fan is looking at this trade and is just have his hands his or her hands on their head looking in confusion. Because they could have gotten a few picks before from winning the game, and they talked about why they gave up on the game against Washington for draft positioning, and then they trade back. I mean, yes. So I get it. Now, at pick number 12, because in my mock drafts prior, I had them taking Jamar Chase. Looking back at it, they could still get a wide receiver, but it's just strange. Plus, like I said, they could get screwed out there by their division rivals. So we'll see how that goes. But nonetheless, that's my thoughts on the news. Guys, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I did. Very interesting things are happening in the sports world. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're new to the podcast, like and subscribe. I'm Ajoe21love. I'll see you guys back on Thursday with your AEW Dynamite review. Also, sorry, my pro wrestling fans. AEW or NXT Takeover Stand and Deliver is not this week, but next week. So I have the Takeover review next week. So there we go. Peace out, guys. Be safe.